Left in Kentucky, the podcast of Indivisible Northern Kentucky. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Left in Kentucky, here with yours truly, Roberto Enriquez, and Amy Ferguson, and Miss Ann Dickerson.
What?
You know what I
All
think?
these years and now you're mispronouncing my name. Oh, the shame, the shame.
You know what it is? I grew up seeing Angie Dickinson on TV, and your name is close enough that that I think that's what my brain keeps saying. So it's kind of a compliment, right? That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Are we still?
Yes. So, hope everybody's having a good and healthy week here, and we are excited to be here. We have a.
I just can't control. I'm breathing so heavy.
Right.
Of being with you guys.
Yeah, so if you hear errant breathing, that's Amy breathing into her microphone. So just ignore it.
I'm just excited.
So we have a special guest coming on a little bit later, Lieutenant Colonel retired Mike Broihier, candidate for U.S. Senate. So we look forward to hearing from him after a while. And
yes, Mike's a cool dude.
Yeah,
fellow farmer. Yes.
Yeah, fellow farmer. He was at our candidate forum back at the beginning of March before all of this happened. So
that was my last social outing.
Mine too, I think.
That was my second to last social outing, but yeah.
Yep.
That was
so you guys should check out our footage from that if you want to hear more from Mike.
Yep.
After you listen to the interview.
Yep, it's on YouTube. You can check it out on our YouTube channel, Indivisible NKY. And we have the forum on there, which had Mike Broihier and Amy McGrath and Charles Booker and Jimmy Osbrooks. So all four of them were at that, and you can check that out on our YouTube channel, and we highly encourage you to. Good information.
Yeah,
there.
Subscribe while you're there. It's actually Indivisible NKY District 4.
Yep. And subscribe if you haven't subscribbled. You guys
I'm a scribbler.
You guys remember?
Somebody's got some COVID fever going on.
No, you guys remember the overly attached girlfriend?
Yes.
Memes? Yeah. So Lena, that's her YouTube videos. That's the way she used to end her YouTube videos. She's not on YouTube anymore. She had to drop back just for personal reasons. But she used to always do that. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Follow me, but not in real life, because that's stalking.
Because that's illegal.
Yep. So speaking of stalking, let's talk about our Cow Patty Awards.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure how that directly relates into it.
Plenty to go around.
Right. Just plethora.
Definitely a plethora of awards. So Ann, why don't you start us off with your Cow Patty Awards this week?
Who?
You.
Ann, you.
Oh, I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. I'm like in a zone right now. Okay, so my Cow Patty Award this week goes to Kentucky's Three Stooges, Mitch McConnell, Rand Paul, and Thomas Massey.
Oh, a stinky one.
Because lo and behold, the three of them remembered collectively yesterday that they're actually from Kentucky.
What?
I know. Blew up Twitter because the three of them started talking about what was happening in Kentucky with the all of the rules around social distancing and everything and various orders. And it all centered around an order from Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher, who had said that for today, for Easter Sunday, that he was going to ban the drive-through church services. And, before today, Andy Beshear, being governor, had said that drive-through services could happen provided specific rules were followed. For example, only one family in a car, no car, he even made a joke of it yesterday saying, this is the one time where we're not going to ask you to carpool. So, and just, common sense stuff like that. Well, anyway, so one of the churches took the case to court, and it just so happened, the comedy of how this all played out. It just so happened to fall in front of Judge Justin Walker.
Wait, that name sounds familiar.
Yeah. He's a young 37-year-old from Kentucky with no trial experience who was deemed not qualified by the American Bar Association to even be a judge. But Mitch McConnell helped, push him through to be to be a judge. And now, let's see, his confirmation hearings were last July, and now he's already up again. They want to promote him from district judge in Western Kentucky to U.S. Court of Appeals judge for the D.C. Circuit, the busiest appeals court in the country.
Well, 1 year seems like enough experience for that.
Right?
Ridiculous.
It isn't even been a year.
Come on, I went to law school for a year. I'd probably do better.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so anyway, so he ruled yesterday. He put a stay on the ban. So, in other words, today, people in Louisville who wanted to do drive-through church services were allowed to do so. Right. So anyway, of course, Mitch McConnell is, playing up his boy. So he realizes he's from Kentucky and talking about religious persecution, blah, blah, blah. And then you got Rand Paul. His is probably my favorite. I can't help it because his quote, here's his quote: quarantining someone for being Christian on Easter Sunday, someone needs to take a step back here. It's moments like this. It's moments. I mean, I don't believe in violence of any kind, but man, things like this make me understand how his neighbor must have.
Yeah. I don't believe in violence, but in this case, I understand it.
I can rationalize it because he deliberately is poking the bear, and using anything and everything out of context.
Right.
It's for attention.
He's the kid on the playground who used to point his finger at your face and get as close as they could to your nose without touching, going, I didn't touch you, I didn't touch you, I didn't touch you. I can just see him now.
Those are the kids that put the voodoo spells on. I wonder what happened.
Well, so anyway, and he misses the whole point, but of course it's to rile up a certain group of people.
Right.
Nobody, first off, the court order about the ban was, and the whole ban, that was just for Louisville, right?
Right.
So there's that. Now, Rand and Thomas Mancy were focusing on Andy Beshear's order for the state police to monitor the 7 churches in the entire state. Now, there must be, goodness knows, there's 120 counties, right?
Yeah.
So if there's 100 churches per county, or even if there's 10 churches per county, that's 1,200 churches. And we all know there's more than that in Kentucky.
Oh, yeah.
With 7, we're talking about 7 churches deliberately defying the governor's order. And the thing is, the governor didn't bring the attention to these people. They brought it to themselves because
Right.
they announced to everyone. They wanted the information to get out to the press. They were interviewing with the press saying they were going to hold services anyway. So let's get that part of the story straight. And they weren't talking about drive-through services. They're talking about in-person services. And the other part to keep in mind is that we have one church in Kentucky already that defied this order previously, has had over 40 people test positive since they held their in-person gathering, and 6 of them have died.
Right.
That's a huge percentage. And when you think about that, the majority of people that do attend in-person church services on a regular basis belong to those communities that are also most affected by this virus. So it makes sense that those populations would be affected greatly compared to the general population. Well, anyway, so the point, all Andy said was, if you're going to gather, then we're going to take your license plate numbers in order to do this, in order to report it to the health department so that we can make sure you self-quarantine for 14 days.
Right.
So he's telling you, just like a parent would,
Right.
you have the choice, but if you make the choice, here's what your consequences are going to be.
Exactly.
So they're making that choice for themselves. He's not saying we're going to arrest you. He's not saying, and he didn't make it just for Christian churches. It was for, synagogue, mosque, church.
Right. Any gathering.
Any social gathering.
Any gathering of that kind.
Right.
Of any kind, of greater than 10 people. We just happen to know about these because they advertised it themselves.
Right.
It's
So
political.
let's put the
It's not
story in
religious.
perspective. Right. So anyway.
I mean, it's like when
that's why-
It's like
Go
when
ahead.
it's like when I went to Boston to get my daughter from school because they closed her dorms. That was towards the middle of March before as they were just starting to issue stay-at-home orders. They hadn't issued one yet, but because I was in Boston and I knew that it was at that time it was one of the centers where they were starting to see issues. When I came back, I quarantined myself for 14 days.
Right.
I didn't. I stayed away from everybody. I even, I stayed away from my mom and my kids, and I self-quarantined for 14 days. Not because I was afraid somebody was going to arrest me, but because that was the patriotic, responsible thing to do to protect those around me, just in case I was exposed.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and to make, that from Rand Paul was bad enough. Not to be outdone, our own, typhoid Tommy had to pile on with this tweet, and as I read it, my jaw just hits the ground. His exact tweet: the same week Jews celebrate freedom from bondage and Christians celebrate freedom from death, Governor Beshear is going to be in your church parking lot scanning your license plate. What the actual hell?
Wow.
Yeah, no, this dude, he's deliberately trying to rile people
Yes.
up, clearly, and making this, about religious persecution when it's not. It's about your choice to participate in group activities when for months we've been telling you no group activities. It wouldn't matter if it was,
He's
a
throwing
group of clowns meeting.
Yeah. It's personal distancing. They closed all the bars. Why?
Right.
Because of personal distancing. Because people in bars weren't maintaining personal distancing. It doesn't have anything to do with religion. It has to do with personal
Right.
distancing.
Right.
Yeah, and for those
But-
that worship alcohol, they can't go to their bars.
I know, and I'm very
Right.
upset about
But-
that. It's really put a
But
cramp on
nothing-
my worship schedule, I want you to know.
Nothing says GOP like politicizing a crisis. They are emulating the worst in people.
They're
It, it
emulating the
just,
top person.
it just, oh,
Yeah.
it just boggles my mind. And the fact that people buy into it is even worse. If you have to be, my question to you is this: how strong can your faith be if you have to be in a physical building in order to worship? Because if that's the way you feel, then you've never read or understood the Bible to begin with. So I don't want to hear it.
Yep.
Okay, I won't say it then.
All right, off my soapbox. It's your old time.
All right. All righty.
You want me to go?
Yeah. Why don't you go next?
So, my cow patty this week goes to the people that are in the GOP in the great state of Wisconsin. And also, I'll have to add our conservative majority on the Supreme Court. So, if you haven't seen this story, which you probably have, but to me, it's very concerning. There was a decision made by the governor that they were going to postpone the primary, which the GOP was not having. So they wanted to extend how long they could send in absentee votes. And so they put that in place. Well, the GOP decided they needed to have an election and they needed to have it now. And so they went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, yeah, you're allowed to do that in the middle of a global pandemic. Go ahead and have an election because we need more conservative judges. And that's really why they pushed it. Obviously, they already know who they're going to pick in their primary for president. So that wasn't a pressing issue, but they needed to get that judge in there. So they threw away our principles of democracy, which people should be able to vote without fear of death. I think
At
it's pretty
least in America.
fundamental thing. And all for getting a conservative judge on the bench. And make no mistake, like this is their focus. Their legs are focused on this because judges are going to be making a big difference in the years to come about how the direction of our country.
And
And the Supreme Court judges prove that quite handily.
Yeah. And it's also a precedence coming up for the November elections. If we have another wave of COVID-19 in the November elections, rather than allowing mail-in voting, now they have this precedence of, the Supreme Court already ruled that we couldn't do that we couldn't postpone to allow more time for mail-in voting from the primary, so we can't do
Right.
that for it establishes precedence, which becomes really important
It does.
when it comes for the November election. But you think of that, people, we tell stories about people in other countries have to choose between they take their life into their own hands for democracy and for the right to vote, and we should treasure the right to vote because and we don't have to risk our lives, but other countries do. Well, now we do. We're in a position where
Right.
you have to
And
risk your
and
life to vote in America, which seems like the most un-American thing I can think of.
well, the sad part about that is, 50% of people didn't even bother to vote in the last presidential election. So, how many more votes are going to be suppressed if we don't allow mail-in voting? It's going to be pathetic. We have to get there, and I would encourage all the listeners to do what you can to push for mail-in voting across the country because if we don't do this, I think that it's going to turn out badly. I really do.
Absolutely. And this narrative of, well, the narrative in general of voter fraud and voting fraud is rampant, and there's all these issues with voting fraud is BS to begin with. But especially with mail-in voting, I mean, there are a number of states that have mail-in voting, and they have no history of voter fraud from mail-in voting. And there's also this narrative that, oh, well, if you do mail-in voting, oh, the Democrats are going to stuff the ballot and only Democrats are going to get elected.
Right.
There's a number of examples of states that have mail-in voting where Republicans have been elected by significant majorities.
Florida being one of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And then you got, Governor Northam, God love him, who just made Election Day a state holiday and expanded early voting in Virginia.
Yep.
Which it should be everywhere. The election day should be a federal holiday.
Absolutely.
Every place,
Absolutely.
At
all
the
the
very
businesses, everything should be closed so that you can go vote. That should be the important thing. Go and vote.
Yep. Buy your cannolis the day before.
Yep.
Alrighty, so let's see. I guess that's
It's
up
your
to me.
turn.
Yeah. So my cow patty, we're going to go super local with this one. My cow patty this week goes to the mayor of Florence, Kentucky, Diane Whalen.
So disappointed in her response.
So I will start off by saying her father was my 7th grade algebra teacher. Okay. So this one's really personal for me. Her father was mayor of Florence, also, Hop Ewing. But Diane Whalen, she asked that one of our local hotels here, Spring Hill Suites, not do business with any of the nonprofits that are trying to house homeless people in northern Kentucky. There was a temporary shelter set up at the convention center in Covington, and it was a limited time, only a few weeks. And so a number of the nonprofits in the area that try to help homeless folks, most notably Welcome House being one of the big ones, had made arrangements with Spring Hill Suites in Florence to house, I think 30 or 40 folks. And Diane Whalen found out, our mayor found out, and contacted them and said, no, please don't work with the nonprofits. We don't need any more homeless. We already have too many homeless people staying in Florence hotels, and it's a public safety concern.
No concern for the people, though, right?
Yeah. There's also this little thing about housing. You are not allowed to discriminate against homeless people when it comes to housing. So the state commission is looking into that as to whether any housing laws were violated. But just in this time that we're in with COVID-19 and trying to keep people safe and maintain the spread of it, to turn your back on fellow humans when Spring Hill Suite, and to understand the hotel had already agreed to it. So the hotel and their company, Spring Hill Suites, is a Marriott company, if I remember right. So, it's not a small company. It's not a small corporation that it's said, yeah, this is okay. We're okay with it. If anything, it's helping them because their
Right.
rentals are down, so their business is hurting in general. But they're willing to do this and help out the homeless. And the mayor of Florence, Kentucky says, nope, because we already have enough homeless people staying in hotels. We don't want any more. So congratulations. You
Cow
have my
patty, well
cow patty.
deserved. Disappointed in you, Diane.
Yeah. And I'm sure I think your father Hop would be as well. So anyway, but that's speculation on my point. So anyway, attaboys. We have any bullhorn attaboys to give out this week? I know usually we discuss these ahead of time, so you guys are going to get to hear us on the cuff, off the cuff here, talking about attaboys.
Who's doing good stuff?
Yeah, I mean the
I've seen
governors
so
that
many
have been
good-
doing good are doing good stuff.
Okay, I know we've done it before, but I can't help it.
I know who you're gonna pick.
I gotta
know who you're
give-
gonna pick.
I got to give credit where credit is due, and that's our governor.
Yes.
I mean, Indivisible made a statement yesterday that was so moving to me.
Oh my gosh, I cried yesterday too. When did you cry?
When he said, I'd give up being politically popular, which I've only been for 3 weeks, to save 42 lives.
And he
Yeah.
would.
And I was like, what? That, it just emulates what I envision the spirit of, public service, the
Yes.
spirit of what our founding fathers intended when, representatives to Congress were actual members of their community and were looked up to in their community for how much they cared about the people in their community.
Yep.
We're stuck with Thomas Massey, who can't tell you shit from Shinola about the majority of Congressional District 4 other than his core 4 issues of guns, unpasteurized milk, auditing the feds, and being able to sell beef local. Of course, that wouldn't affect him, a beef farmer, without proper inspection or whatever the heck it is.
Think that we should do that, even as a local, small cattle farmer.
Right,
That's
right.
silly.
But my point is this, you have people who are already, people are jumping on this bandwagon. The GOP was just so gross yesterday, and that's the best word to use for it, saying that he used up all the what was it? Something to the effect of he had used up all the clout he had built with Republicans that were liking him for his response and everything by doing the whole taking down of license plate thing. So the GOP was instantly politicizing him doing this. And this was his response, that he give it up. He'll give up being politically popular to save 42 lives. And the other part of his response, which he started to get choked up on, and I'm starting to kind of choke up just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Is he said his exact words were, they don't have to stand up here and announce these deaths every day.
Yeah.
And I don't care what anybody else says. He cares, and you can tell he cares, and he means it. It's authentic.
Yeah.
This isn't
It's
somebody
jarring.
doing. It is jarring, and it's not somebody who's acting out of political expedience, and nor should it be. He's constantly saying, I'm not representing Democrats or Republicans up here. I'm representing Americans. I'm representing Kentuckians. And the other part of what he said was, whether right or wrong, I feel responsible for these deaths.
Yeah.
Even when I try to get everybody to do everything they can to prevent getting this disease, I feel responsible. You could just through the screen, you could feel the weight of the entire state on his heart and on his shoulders. So
It's so refreshing. He takes all the responsibility.
Yes.
But he gives all the kudos to the people that are out here doing the work and staying home. And it's just so refreshing.
It is. And he's taking responsibility for things that aren't even his fault or aren't within his ability to control, because you're always going to have these fools like these, Liberty Bro wingnuts talking about, oh, my freedom, my freedom. You have the freedom, go gather at church. But then we're going to make sure you stay inside for 14 days and don't infect the rest of us.
Right.
I mean, that's just a fact. It's your choice.
Here's the crazy thing about all this, right? Is that what we are talking about here, and what we are saying is refreshing, is our elected leaders showing genuine empathy for fellow human beings.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's what we are being impressed by from our leadership. And if that isn't a great example of what is wrong with our elected leaders today, I don't know what is.
I know. I mean,
well, not just
cynicism is
that,
horrible.
but the mentality of people
Right.
who would not support that. I just don't get it. It takes me back, and this is just before my time, but it was such a huge part of my mother's life that it was drilled into my head from an early age. It takes me back to JFK, and ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. It's the same type of mentality.
Right.
What can you do to help the country? What can you do to help your fellow Kentuckians? Well, and he lays it out every day. Here's what you can do.
Yeah.
Stay home. If you got to make a trip to the grocery store, send one person.
Yep.
Don't take the kids. Don't shop for a month because everybody's trying to do the same thing that you're trying to do. Just shop for a week.
Yep.
It's simple, minor, little things.
Yeah. We're not asking you to we're not asking you to storm a beach.
Right. And then you've got people here's one I saw today. Some lady was complaining about this whole not being able to get her church thing, and then comparing it to grocery stores. And I said, wait a minute. Not everybody can order online. Not everybody has a credit card that they can place an order online and have it delivered to them.
Right.
Or place it, any place that, even if it's Kroger's and you're going to go pick it up and they're going to go bring it out to your car, you still have to have a card to put it on.
Yep.
It's not done by cash transaction. Not everybody has that ability.
Right.
Some people still have to write checks or pay in cash. Hard as it may seem to believe, that's just the way it is.
Yep.
And for those people, groceries are essential. Everyone has to have them. There is no one I know, not a single person who can claim that they have to be in a physical place to worship. Not one.
Yep.
Not even a priest or a minister has to be inside the building to worship.
Nope. And most of them agree with the governor on that, I think.
Right. And that's the other thing. When you have 99.9% in agreement, and you've got these 0.01% wingnuts that have to show their ass to get attention and get their followers riled up. Those are the ones, when you talk about there's always one bad apple in the bunch, that's them. Those are the bad apples making life hard for the rest of us.
Yep.
Truth.
And it's just ridiculous.
So kudos to Andy.
Amen.
Excellent.
From the agnostic. Amen.
All right, so that's going to wrap up our cow patties and bullhorn for this week. Our special guest this week on Left in Kentucky is Lieutenant Colonel Mike Broihier. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Oh, thanks, Roberto. And hi, Ann. Hi, Amy. It's great to be here with you guys. I miss seeing your faces. I really do.
It is. It's weird, isn't it? We don't get to see anybody anymore.
It is. It's very, very strange. And, people who are politically engaged, you see them all of the time. And, when they walk into a room, it's like, okay, this is going to be good. And now now I don't get to see you, but sometime soon.
Yeah, it is fun this time of year. That's usually what, you show up at events and it's like, oh, look, there's so and so and there's candidate so and so, and kind of missing those days. But we'll be back to that soon, hopefully.
It
So,
starts to become like a family. You see the same people over and over. You're kind of like a family.
yep. So Mike is running for U.S. Senate in Kentucky against what's that guy? He's only been in the Senate for a few years.
It's Addison.
Mitchell, something
It's a
like that.
turtle.
The turtle. Yep. So anyway, Mike's running for U.S. Senate here in Kentucky, and as I always say, I respect anybody that puts themselves out there to run for any elected office. It's a tough time on you and your family, especially these days, the way campaigns go. But anyway, Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and why you're running for this position?
Well, okay, from the intro, people heard the retired, the Marine Lieutenant Colonel. I'm a retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel, married to a retired Marine. And, in the Marine Corps, I served in over a dozen countries around the world, from Somalia as a rifle company commander during the Somali Civil War to Korea, to the Republic of Korea as the Marine Corps' lead war planner. And also a school teacher. I did my last 3 years teaching at the University of California. This is my last duty in the Marine Corps, and then came here to Kentucky and bought a place here in 2004. And so I substitute teach, not this year because I'm campaigning, but in the past I've been a substitute teacher in Lincoln County Public Schools. So I like to say I taught every grade from kindergarten through college. And I think most importantly is that Lynn and I are farmers. We met on active duty, and we decided, we both realized that we had an interest in agriculture, particularly sustainable agriculture. And so almost 16 years ago, we bought a farm here in Lincoln County, and we've been farming ever since. As a matter of fact, Lynn dropped off our first crop of the year for the Lexington Farmers Market this weekend. So the first couple days of asparagus harvesting generated 65 pounds. So
wow,
some lucky. Yeah, usually it doesn't come in that hot and quick.
Yeah.
And so Lynn dropped off 65 pounds, I think, on Friday for the weekend market. So thankfully the governor's left the farmers market, so it gives us an outlet for our first crop of the year. And so I've been, Lynn and I have been farming here in Kentucky for the last 15 years. We've done some stuff off the farm because farming is an expensive proposition.
Yep.
Yep. So let's see. Lynn worked as the public health preparedness planner in Lincoln County, and a little over 10 years ago, she wrote the pandemic flu plans for Lincoln County, and that was back during the good old days of H1N1 and SARS. And then she got pulled. Then she got pulled back on active duty to write the plan for the Marine Corps Reserves, not just protecting the force, but employing the reserves in aiding the country in a pandemic. So I hope somewhere someone found those binders and dusted them off, and are putting all that hard work into use. And then I was a reporter for our local newspaper for 2 years, the Interior Journal, third oldest newspaper in Kentucky. And then I was editor for 3 years. And so that kind of brings us up to today.
Great. So what made you decide to run for U.S. Senate? Just bored, nothing really to do? I know there's not much to do on a farm. There's lots of free time.
Right.
Yeah, lots of which is it's a conversation I have with my dad. He said, you guys have been there for all this time. You think everything would be done. Right now, a piece of roof is blowing off the tobacco barn. A fence post is falling over. Right. It never ends. But no, other than having loads of time on our hands, we were basically trying to mind our own business here. And I think the last 3 years, it's been hard. And watching the country sliding into what I see as authoritarianism was scary. And it was, when you see just this runaway executive with Congress, or at least the Senate refusing to put any check on it, and particularly these judges, these unqualified judges that are being just rammed through into federal seats that they're going to have for the rest of their lives. These are lifetime appointments. And as I was watching this, and there was a slow dawning realization that Donald Trump is the symptom, and Mitch McConnell and his ilk are the problem. The people who do not care about the Constitution, they do not care about the fate of the republic. They sure as heck don't care about Kentucky. They care about, consolidating their power and getting rich.
Yeah.
And so as a Kentuckian, I looked at it and said, okay, we can get rid of this single point of failure, because McConnell truly is a single point of failure. I mean, one man, and I can't imagine the founders ever imagined that the Senate Majority Leader would be able to literally stop all progress in the country. And I think it was just because of his character that we have this perfect storm of badness that has stopped any legislation from going forward, that has allowed the federal benches to be packed and basically allows the president to do whatever the hell he wants. And so I said, well, as a Kentuckian, it's I have the opportunity to take him out. And I looked at my resume and I said, McConnell's never run against a retired combat veteran. He's never run against a teacher, and he's never run against a farmer. He's never run against someone who had all those characteristics that could really, really cut a pretty wide swath across all parts of Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I have a unique opportunity to take him out. And that's why, and once Lynn and I made the decision, it was almost exactly a year ago. Once we made the decision, we've been all in ever since. I mean, I know I declared in July, but the real work started about this time a year ago.
Right. Excellent. So now that you're in it, and you've been in it for about a year, what do you see as the big important issues in this particular race?
In the race, or what do you think is most important to me as someone who wants to go to Washington, D.C.?
Well, first, I'd like to know what you think the big issues are in the race, and then we can definitely transition into what you want to accomplish.
All right. Well, I think the race is. I think the key to the race is that Kentucky for the last 35 years, and I know in the intro you were joking how long he'd been there, but Mitch McConnell, put it this way, Mitch McConnell and I entered federal service in the same year, 1984. One of us is a multi-millionaire, and the other one's an asparagus farmer in Lincoln County. But I still think, I made the right decision. But I think the key to this race is having a candidate that can excite the Democratic base to get them to turn out. And you folks in Northern Kentucky know what getting the vote out is all about, because you brought the heat last November. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. So you three particularly, and my other friend, other folks I know up there, how much you have to get people excited and get them to turn out the vote. And then, yes. and you do that. And then of course, the other thing is we have a significant number of Democrats who vote Republican. And so the key is getting a candidate who's going to be able to pull some of those people who still may be compelled to vote for Trump, but break them away from McConnell, because he's wildly unpopular. Yeah. And as a teacher, as a farmer, and as a retired veteran, I think that I can pull those people out of the middle and bring them over to our side. And whether they vote for Trump or not, I'm sure they didn't, but that's fine. But they'll probably vote against Mitch McConnell when they have a good alternative. So we excite the base, and we excite the base, and then pull those people out of the middle. And that is enough to get rid of a senator who hovers around 35% popularity.
Okay, great. So to your question, what are the issues that you want to address that you think need to be handled by our next senator?
Well, I think I think this coronavirus, this pandemic, has basically brought into stark relief about everything that I've been talking about on the campaign trail, whether it's universal basic income, whether it's single payer healthcare, but most importantly, I think the very, very top line thing is leadership. And then we've got this toxic transactional leadership in Washington, D.C. And, I think it's best exemplified by our dear leader who, wants governors to speak kindly of him, before they get their ventilators, but that is just because he has no ability to suppress these thoughts in his head. But that is the way the system works in Washington. I want to bring about a fundamental change where we're not pitting states against each other. And I've been saying this way before there was a coronavirus when I was talking about Appalachia. And for example, people say, how are we going to renew Appalachia? And, I've been reaching out to candidates in other states who are running for office to try to share a vision where when we go to Washington, we fight together. West Virginia and Kentucky are not competing for grants. We go to Washington and we say, these 8 coal producing states are demanding that we repair the economic and environmental damage done to Appalachia while we were building the great cities, the roads and the bridges of this nation. And so, this is something that I've been part of my, it's part of my platform and stump from the very, very beginning, where fight each other as states, and even if you go into Kentucky, Appalachia, we have a bunch of different great groups operating there, but they're competing for grants. And every year or 5 years or 10 years, you have to go back for reauthorization. So you're constantly beholden to the people in Washington. And that's not the way it should be. People in DC should be making the right decisions for the country and for the states that they represent, not forcing people into this transactional relationship where even, the worst example I can think of is the Black Lung Disability Trust Fund.
Yeah.
This is something that is a complete no-brainer, yet we're going to see. So this year they after much press, they reauthorized it. Instead of reauthorizing it for 10 years, they reauthorized it for a year. So that means late next summer, we're going to see bus loads of coal miners with oxygen tanks driving back to DC to seek an audience from our elected leaders. And that fundamental, and that is a relationship they like. They like the dependency. And it's, I know you're not allowed to say quid pro quo in Washington, but it's quid pro quo. and so at the very, very top level, it's changing, the fundamental dynamics of Washington. And so what we see brought into relief by the COVID thing is the fact that states are fighting over PPE, other material, and say ventilators. And finally, instead of stepping in as the federal government, and saying, we're going to use the Defense Production Act, we're going to direct businesses to produce these things, and we'll establish the supply chain and get them out to the states on a as need basis. That's leadership. That's taking responsibility. And we know our president just says, I take no responsibility. So instead, you got a dogfight between the states, and Gavin Newsom from California last week steps up and says, I'm done with this. I'm buying, and I think he bought contract 5 million masks. And so, California's got the 6th largest economy in the world. There's no way a Kentucky or a Tennessee or an Ohio is going to compete against their might.
Right.
The whole weight of California. But that's because of a fundamental lack of leadership in Washington.
Excellent. Anne, did you have some questions you wanted to pop in there?
Yeah, sure. A couple things, because I'm going to try to play off what you said at the same time as what I was thinking before we even started. One of the things that I think is really important in Kentucky and has been talked about, I'm 52, and I honestly can't remember a time when we weren't talking about coal country and Appalachia and things of that nature. We've known for probably 3 decades that, coal was going out. And by science, we've always known that it's not, an unlimited resource. It runs out at some point. But we've known consistently for 30 years the damage that it does, not only to the environment, but to the health and welfare of the people. However, it's also a culture. It's a tradition for those families. But you mentioned something on your website, on your issues page, that is near and dear to my heart, and that's infrastructure. Um, every single since the primary for the presidential race or any race has started, every single survey that I've gotten where they have a space marked other for issues, I put infrastructure in all capital letters because I don't think we hear enough about it. After World War II, while we were busy policing the world, everybody else got to rebuild but us. And that's why you see places like, China and in Europe that have super railways and all these things that our country doesn't have. And meanwhile, we're stuck with the Brent Spence Bridge up here in Kenton County, which carries between 3 and 4% of the GDP for the entire nation every single day, which Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul have known about for 15 years. Thomas Massey has known about since the day he entered office. And nothing has been done about this bridge. They've had plan after plan after plan, and it always falls through. So that's a really long way of saying I like the way that you tie infrastructure to jobs, because I've not seen that from any other candidate in any other kind of race, whether it's presidential or local. I really like it. I wish more people would tie into it, because I think it also plays into job retraining on somewhat of a parallel level. And that's one thing that I've always heard from, coal miners and coal families and people from Appalachia is that, when it comes to retraining, what are you talking about? You're not going to take a bunch of men and women who are used to working with their hands and working down in the coal mines and retrain them all to be computer programmers. It just seems unreasonable. So I'm curious as to if you can expand on that, Emmy, and give us ideas for what would play well in that part of the country, not just for Kentucky, but like you said, the whole, coalition of states that are affected in that area that is desperate for revitalization.
Well, I appreciate your question, and I also appreciate that you stumbled a little bit over Brent Spence Bridge, because I have to practice saying it.
We stumble over that a lot.
I could not say it 3 times fast.
Right.
I'd have Brent Spiner from Star Trek on if I tried to say it 3 times fast. But and Brent Spence is a great example, and I know it's near and dear to everyone up in your neck of the woods. It's a huge concern, but it's a great example. And you mentioned the fact this huge portion of the GDP crosses that bridge. The federal government is good at 2 things: infrastructure and war. And so what I want to do with the infrastructure plan is create a national schedule of critical infrastructure. Roads, bridges, inland waterways. And to carry it on to the power grid and to our internet infrastructure, and maybe even down to hospitals, and so we come up with a schedule, and we build, we repair, and we replace on a schedule. And so there's no fighting. It's not, Ohio and Kentucky are not looking across the river at each other going, how the hell are we going to pay to fix this bridge? It's part of the plan. And so you do not have to go. And actually what it does, though, it kind of kicks the kickstand out from underneath the Lane Chow, Mitch McConnell. I can bring in some highway money during a election year. And so
he's great for that. You always know when the election's 18 months away.
Yep. It's the only time
the money starts.
It's the only time he does anything for the state.
Right. That's when the money starts rolling in.
And I know it's going to be grossly unpopular, because if the bridge just gets, built, repaired, and replaced on a schedule, then there's no quid pro quo. You don't owe your congressman or senator anything because they didn't bring home the bacon to you. It's just time to, it's time for us to do maintenance on this bridge, and it just gets done. And the good thing about doing it at the federal level, and I'm going back to like the WPA, Works Project Administration.
Yes.
You take out the middleman. You take out the middleman, and when you do federal government construction, you either pay union wage or prevailing wage. their benefits. Everyone, it's because it's the law. And so there are good jobs that come with it, and they're ongoing jobs. And we are going to need a massive injection of this because it's going to take us. I'm no economist, but I mean, I've read reports of taking 2 years to come out of the recession or depression that's going to come out of this pandemic. So, and the best way to do it is to get people working. The good thing about working on infrastructure is when you're done, you've got infrastructure. You've got bridges and roads and highways and.
Well, I had Barbie Ann Maynard on my live stream where she was talking about Martin County water situation and many people probably know that the people in Martin County, Kentucky can't even drink or bathe in the water that comes out of their taps. So, and while Barbie Ann and her folks are working really, really hard, they're constantly struggling for grants and trying to get grants for people to come in and help them with their water situation. When it's ridiculous that they have to do that because, as she said on my live stream, she was, we're not a third world country and we should not have to do this. And there's no reason they should be, these grants are finite. And so they are in competition with other groups to get them. And so this is something with a way, basically, if the Corps of Engineers can build a hospital in 3 weeks, like a 2,000-bed hospital in 3 weeks, they can fix the Martin County water problem in a year. And that's what we need to do. And so I can't remember exactly if I'd gone down this path yet, but my plan for Appalachia, though, is to have a just transition to a green economy where we can take the 8 Appalachian coal states, recover the former mines, rebuild the infrastructure, and turn it into a regional power hub for the eastern half of the United States. And with green jobs, with good paying jobs, and with jobs with a future. Because, I don't remember if it was Ann or Amy was saying earlier about, the coal running out. Well, the people who know best that the coal's running out are the coal miners. And they are literally begging to be brought along into jobs in this century. And so with my plan to employ them to rebuild their own communities at good rates in jobs, important jobs, green jobs, will not just be jobs for them, good paying jobs that bring good infrastructure, but jobs for the future of their families.
Excellent.
Jinx, give me a soda.
Yeah. So looking at, so let's talk a little bit about international and foreign relations and what like that. We've gone from being from the United States really being a leader in the world to a more of an isolationist view of the world, and we'll just take care of our own, and you all do whatever you want to do because we don't care. I guess what do you see as what we should be doing, especially in relationship to the U.S. Senate, and if you were elected, what would you like to see the U.S. Senate do on the foreign front?
Well, as I said earlier, the pandemic has brought everything into stark relief. The go it alone thing isn't exactly working. I need to dig back into one of the very, very first interviews I did after I announced for office, and a reporter had asked, well, what other things concern you? And I happened to mention, pandemics. But I was talking in the terms of international relations, how we need to work with other countries and organizations and non-governmental organizations. And I said, we're one international flight away from a global pandemic. And I remember the reporter looked at me like really funny, and I was like, yeah, maybe I better not talk about that anymore. Because, back last July, it sounded like a wacky response. But we are such
You're so wacky.
Oh, how the times have changed.
Yeah, how times have changed. But literally, I mean, the reporter was like, that's kind of weird. And I was like, maybe I'll drop that. but I mean, I don't have the damn crystal ball or anything, but we can all see how interconnected the world is. And we cannot ignore the fact that, we have to trade globally, and this go it alone thing. And so we need to have sane, trade relationships that do not destroy jobs in this country and give us an outlet for our goods. More importantly, having good relations with are, having good relationships all around the world is incredibly important. And I always talk about what we call the DIME model: diplomacy, information, the military, and the economy. Those are 4 elements of national power. And the problem with Washington today is that the only tool they think they have in the toolbox is the military. And as Lynn and I spent added together probably 42, 43 years in the military, serving around the world, we should be the last element of national power that is used. We're talking about, someone mentioned trains earlier. I was working on the Horn of Africa in 2016, 2017, and China is building a railroad between Djibouti and Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And they're building with local workers, and they are paying for everything. And so those 2 countries are getting a beautiful brand new railroad for passengers and freight. And the Chinese have built monstrous ports in freight handling ports, cargo handling ports in Djibouti. And so all these people in the Horn of Africa are being employed. They're making a good wage. Their countries are going to be left with something, in the end of it. And China's making huge inroads. And meanwhile, we've got a big giant Navy base there. And, and the worst part of it is that we keep the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marine penned up like dogs on that base. And they do not get out in town, and they do not associate with the people of Djibouti. Yet the Chinese are out smiling and greeting and hiring people. And so, we are losing out on the international front by this whatever obsession with rugged individualism or xenophobia, whatever it is. And we need to be engaged in the world. You probably know the Republic of Korea is near and dear to my heart. I talk about it all the time, but I worked there for 2 years in 2000, 2002. And they're fantastic allies. It's an incredibly modern, advanced country, very, very similar to ours in ethos. And if you take a look at Corona testing, they were testing 10,000 people a day when we were testing 80. And it would have been nice if we had an ally we could turn to and say, hey, little help here,
Yeah.
A little help here, please. But not, because we've defined our relationship with them. We've strained our relationship with them, and we've frankly insulted them. And if we'd asked, they probably would have come to our aid, but you can't go back to that well too many times. And I guess when we're talking about priorities going to Washington, absolutely positively, first thing on international, rebuilding our State Department, because the State Department handles a lot of the 3 elements of national power. The other one being the military, and so and the president has made a special target out of the State Department, and a lot of the career professionals have left. And when we saw Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch testify, that is the quality of people at the professional level in the State Department. I don't know, I cannot imagine anyone watching her testimony in front of the House Intelligence Committee and not going, wow, where do we find this lady? Well, in the State Department, you used to be able to find a lot of people like her, but they left. So, top priority, at least on the international side, is rebuilding our State Department and rebuilding our relationships with our traditional allies, and stop relying on the military all of the time.
I have a question sort of related to foreign relations. It has to do with climate change. How much of an emergency do you see in the way our climate is changing? And how would you work with our international partners to help us get to a better place?
Well, I kind of liken it to an oil tanker at sea, that they plan their turns way, way, way out, because you just cannot turn an oil tanker or an aircraft carrier on a dime. And so the earlier you make your course corrections, the less drastic they are. We are, we are a little bit too late for gentle course corrections. So I see it as an imminent threat to the United States and an imminent threat to the world economy And so, yes, immediately back into the Paris Accords, back into working with our partners, because it is the only way we're gonna solve this problem.
Excellent. So, as I think most people are aware right now in the Senate, it's a Republican-controlled Senate. If so, let's say you're elected, and fortunately, that would mean that Mitch McConnell is no longer there. But let's say that it's still a Republican-led Senate. How would you, I guess, what would be your strategy for trying to work with a Republican-led Senate to achieve some of your goals?
Well, I think the first thing to do is say, hey, remember the guy who used to sit in this seat? He's not here anymore. Yeah, I can't remember his name, but he was here for a long time because, and this will be the hugest tragedy beyond the loss of life from this pandemic, if there's not a fundamental change of the way we are led from Washington. Our economy, whether it's, the fact that, I think people are going to realize that having healthcare tied to employment is wrong. I think that they're going to realize that, things like universal basic income, which, 4 or 5 months ago, Andrew Yang was the lone voice in the wilderness. And all of a sudden you got the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal going, hey, maybe there's something to this. And so I think that we are going to see a huge shift in the way people think in Washington. And the hugest tragedy beyond the loss of human life of this pandemic would be if we rush back to the comfort as business as usual. But I don't think the people in America will accept that, frankly. I think that they're ready for huge changes to our healthcare, because think about it, for our healthcare system tied to employment, right? And then all of a sudden, within the period of 2 weeks, you dump 6 million more people onto the unemployment rolls, 6 million families without healthcare, facing the largest health challenge we've seen in this, since 1918, right?
Right.
And so I think that anybody who wants to stay in Washington is going to have to get on board with huge changes. And if they want to, they can be part of the change, or they can get mowed over, because I think the American people are not going to accept business as usual.
Yeah, I think whether you talk, public option, private option, public only, whatever, I firmly believe we need to get to a point where we decouple healthcare from our employment, from our employer. Those just need to be separate things. Our other insurance, our car insurance that we're all required to have, is not part of our employment, and I don't see why health insurance should be.
Right, and I don't want to sound flippant about it. I don't, I want a single payer system, probably modeled on Canada, and I'm less hung up on the terminology and how we get there. But I think it needs to be a ground up build, and we have a lot of countries we can learn from. Australia has got an interesting system. It's kind of, instead of having a public option, they have a private option, but they have a single payer system. Canada's got a very, very robust single payer system, and just common sense stuff like allowing Health and Human Services to negotiate prescription drug prices like every other government in the world does, And so these are simple things, and I think anyone who wants to, if you're a politician, you want to sell business as usual, you're going to be in for a rude surprise come election day.
Yeah. So something we've been asking everybody that's been on the show. We've been asking them to kind of talk about how the stay-at-home orders and the public distancing has affected their campaigns. I like calling it personal distancing or public distancing rather than social distancing, because I don't know, social distancing seems to be a little isolating. So, the personal distancing and the stay at home, I know that's affected a lot of campaigns. And while we're not asking you to give away any campaign secrets or secret strategies or anything like that, I do think people are interested in knowing how you're adjusting your campaign to deal with the world we're living in today.
I was actually fortunate. I think you probably know about 2 months ago when Andrew Yang ended his presidential campaign, a lot of Yang's national staff came to work for me here in Kentucky. And they are just they're really, really smart. They understand grassroots organizing. They understand building a political campaign from the ground up, because that's what they had to do for Yang. And so when they came to work for me, it was just an incredible stroke of luck that they happened to be on board when this pandemic hit. And it was seamless to me as the candidate, but it appeared like they did not miss a beat. They just said, okay, this is the way we campaign now. And, so they, instead of traveling around to meet and greets, were reaching out to county parties and facilitating town halls. I was doing a weekly live stream, which was just me yakking at the camera. But when we started this self-quarantining, they said, hey, you're going to go live every night for a half hour or an hour. Call it Chicken Bristle Live. We'll line up guests. And so, it's turned into, we get over 2,000 views a night, which is pretty good. And it goes out on a whole bunch of different platforms, Twitter, simultaneously Twitter, Periscope, Facebook, and YouTube. And so every night there's more than 2,000 viewers. And so we're having tonight, I've got Chris Hartman coming on from the Fairness Campaign. And then on Tuesday, we got Matt Jones coming on to talk about his new book and what he learned about Mitch McConnell. And then there's this other guy next week sometime. I have no idea. Enriquez something.
I don't know. I've heard he's full of hot air.
If anyone's got any lowdown on that cat, let me know just before I talk to him. But
can't talk about my brother.
so we've changed. We just changed, and I know it was a lot of work on the back end for my campaign staff, but for me, they're just so my day is full. And there's cool things too, like they put in call time just to call people and thank them, just call people and not ask them for stuff is really, really good for the soul and mental health. And people are always surprised when you call them up and say, hey, just call them to check in and see how you're doing. They're like, and then, and then people want to chat because it's weird and different. And so I'll tell you what, the schedule's no less full, but there's less driving around town, and I think actually maybe even more effective. So all credit to my campaign team who just changed gears and said, off we go.
Nice. I like that idea of calling folks up and asking them how they're doing, genuinely asking them how they're doing. I know that's personally one of my frustrations is it seems like the only time I get contacted by campaigns is, we want money, give us money. And I get it. I mean, campaigning is an expensive venture. I'm running for an office myself here in Kentucky. I get it. I understand that it's expensive. But it gets to feel, it gets to feel weird when the only time a campaign contacts you is to go, hey, give us money. So I like that. I like that, contacting them just to see how they're doing and how things are going. I appreciate that you guys are doing that.
Well, and it's, it's good for me too. It's good mentally and emotionally just to not have a transactional relationship. There are people who are not donating money, but writing postcards or sending texts or whatever it is that they're doing, and just calling up to say thanks. So it's a lot of fun for me too, and I like it. So yeah, that's
great.
Campaigning for us in the digital age.
Great. So if people want to find out more about you and your campaign, where should they look online to find out more about that?
They can go to mikeforky.com, mikeforky.com, and that's my platform and links to videos, social media, and stuff like that. And then off our Chicken Whistle Live, our live stream every night goes off my campaign Facebook page, Mike Broihier for Senate, and it kicks off at 7. I'm sorry, Mike Broihier for Kentucky. Got so many different accounts here. So Mike Broihier for Kentucky, and you can link to it off the webpage as well. 7 o'clock, up thereabouts, we start. And it's just a great chance. We field questions. People can, put questions in via Twitter or Facebook, and I'll field them or our guests field them. And it's just a kind of fun, interactive, not particularly political show. So, yeah. So the best way, though, is mike4ky.com, and they can get to any place from there.
Okay, great. And I will be putting that information on the details for this podcast. So if you want to look those up, I will have those links on the details for the podcast. So feel free to look those up from there. And I'm assuming there's also a way for, on the mike4ky.com, I'm assuming there's a way for people to reach out and contact you if they want to ask your question or where you stand on a position or something like that.
Absolutely, they can submit it. Actually, the social media platforms are great, but there's a info, there's info address, info@mike4ky.com, and we watch it all the time. People sending questions all the time, whether they ask questions about my platform or they want to volunteer, or they want to tell me to go to want to tell me to go to hell. That's.
Well, hopefully
you're
you
already
don't get
trying to get to the Senate. That's as close as you're.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Yeah, right.
I think that's one of the circles of Dante's Inferno. So
You should say, yes, sir, I am trying to get to the Senate.
all right. Well, thanks, Mike. We appreciate you being on the show today, and we wish you much luck in the upcoming primary, which is June 23rd, correct?
June 23rd. Don't you dare miss it.
Yep. June.
Yep. No, I think the last day to register now is what, May 26th, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds right.
Ooh.
That sounds right. May 26th. So, and remember, if you are going to be 18 by the November election, you can register to vote in the primary. If you're going to be 18 by the primary, my one of my kids will turn 18 in October, so we registered her just last month to make sure that she was ready to vote in the primary. And
Nice.
yeah, so make sure you share that with folks. I think a lot of people don't realize that if you're going to be 18 by the November election, you can still vote in the primary.
I did the same thing with my niece. She turns 18 in July, and she and her friend both went and registered.
Yep, excellent. All right, thanks again, Mike. We appreciate it. Good luck. And
Thanks, Mike.
We'll talk to you again
Roberto
soon, Mike.
And Amy, great talking to you all. Can't wait till I see your faces in person sometime
I
real
know.
soon.
Yep,
I know.
real soon. Take care.
Take care,
All right,
Mike.
take care, guys. Bye-bye.
That's going to wrap it up for this week of Left in Kentucky. And hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. And we sure had a good time doing it.
As always.
Yep, as always. Let's see. Next week, I don't think I'm not sure who we have lined up next week, so we'll kind of make it a surprise. If there's anybody that you would...
I like surprises.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, then one of you will be happy and one of you won't be.
I'll just be real. I like to plan.
If there's somebody you'd like to see on Left in Kentucky, or a topic you'd like to see us cover on Left in Kentucky, please feel free to drop us a line, send us an email. We also ask you to spread the word about the podcast, share it with your friends and your neighbors and your enemies. Share it with everybody, because they all count towards our numbers, which is what it's all about, right?
Yes, we want to numbers. We want numbers, guys.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So until next week, you guys stay healthy out there. And
I'm not a robot.
okay. Thank you for clearing that up. There was a question about that. So anyway, until next week, this is Roberto Enriquez.
Amy Ferguson, not a robot.
And Dickerson.
And we'll see you next week on Left in Kentucky. Left in Kentucky is the podcast of Indivisible Northern Kentucky.